G'day folks, my name is Rob. Welcome back to another F1 Fantasy video. Today I want to take a look at a few drivers that are probably worth avoiding ahead of the first race week in March. If you like the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel. I'm looking to hit a very small subscriber goal of 250 by the start of the first race. So if you like what you see and you want to see more of it, be sure to give the channel a subscribe. I've got three drivers I want to cover in this little video. The first being Yuki Tsunoda. We saw him the last two seasons put in a number of very solid performances in the AlphaTauri, but he is coming off a very disappointing season in 2022, particularly in fantasy terms, where he only accumulated 79 points across the entire season, which was only good for about 3.6 points per race. I know a lot of those results were dogged by DNS, reliability issues, whatever it might have been, and he did, initially seem like he was one I was going to consider at various points throughout the season when I just thought he'd turned a corner, and unfortunately that was not to be. Yuki's performances were probably not that great compared to his 2021, and despite starting the season at 8.5 million, which was probably based to a degree on how his performance was in the prior season, ended the season at 4 million, which was by far and away the lowest price for an asset in F1 Fantasy. I think a lot of that, though, had to do with the fact that not only was the car unreliable, but he was also outperformed for the most part by Pierre Gasly. Again, as I've said, the car wasn't great by AlphaTauri standards, and Gasly also had a very underwhelming season, but to still be beaten 64% of the time by your teammate is by no means impressive. And if you're looking at drivers that want to rack up points for beating teammates, assuming those rules stay the same with the new game incoming, then Yuki is probably a driver I would look to avoid from the outset. I'm not saying you need to avoid him for the entire season, but I definitely think after last season's performance and the kind of car that AlphaTauri served up in 2022 is not one I'm really looking at from the get-go. If we do see results in pre-season testing, which obviously change our opinion on things, then maybe Tsunoda will come back into my thinking. But as of right now, I don't think he is going to be on my short list of drivers I want in my team. I've got him coming in at around 7 million, and I know that might be a little on the expensive side based on what we saw last season. So I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in within 0.5 to a million less than that. But I think him and Vries, because they are very evenly matched, and I'll get to that shortly, I don't think they need to be priced too dissimilar to one another. I think Tsunoda will have his work cut out for him from the outset. Vries is a very good driver from what we saw last season. So I definitely think that, you kind of already know what you're getting in Tsunoda. And because there isn't a clear number one, there isn't a teammate, there isn't a driver between those two teammates that is going to be the far and away best driver on the team. I'm probably going to steer clear for now until we see performances from both of them that give us a much better idea of how we expect them to go moving forward. The next driver I want to take a look at is Nico Hulkenberg. He comes off a couple of seasons on the sidelines, has snapped him up looking at the experience that he's brought to the table over the years. We know he deputised for Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin last season for a couple of races. And he comes into a team that's just looking for consistency and solid results. They're not expecting him to blow half the grid off the park or more. And as a result of that, don't really have any statistics to include on this section. But notwithstanding that, I think Hulkenberg comes into a team where him and Magnussen have had their differences over the years. I don't think that's going to affect how he drives throughout the year, but K-Mag has an extra year under his belt in the last 12 months, and I think that's really going to favour him against Hulkenberg moving forward. But I think we know what we get in terms of Nico. He's a proven driver, and despite the fact that it's well documented he hasn't podiumed, I think it's the longest streak in F1 without a podium, I still think he is going to be a solid driver for that Haas team. But I think he should probably take a few races to get to grips with the car. That has had a really strong start out of the blocks last season, as we saw from K-Mag, and was also able to deliver that impressive qualifying performance in the back half of the year. So Hulkenberg's got a little bit of work to do, and I think if K-Mag and Nico come in around the same price, I'd probably be inclined to go with Magnussen instead, just because of that familiarity with the team, with the car. But again, and I caveat this with every driver, every video that I put out before preseason testing, that there may be some things we see in preseason testing that we just don't anticipate. And if Hulkenberg does deliver some really good times in preseason, then that might change my school of thought. But as of right now, just because of the fact that he's had a year on the sidelines, a couple of years on the sidelines, comes into a new team with a teammate that has a little bit more experience in recent times than him, and probably will be priced around a similar amount, I'll probably be weighted towards Magnussen over Hulkenberg if I had to decide between the two. There's also going to be other drivers that come in between that $7 and $9 million mark. So he's probably a little bit further down the ladder in terms of priorities in that price bracket for me. But again, if we see things that change our school of thought, then he may re-enter the discussion. The third driver I want to take a look at is the other AlphaTauri driver, Nick De Vries. He comes to the grid as a rookie. We saw what he was capable of last season at Monza, deputising for Alex Albon. He blew Latifi off the park, which, given Latifi's performance last year, probably wasn't too hard. But the fact he was able to deliver points on his debut in a Williams, which has historically been a pretty poor car, the stage has been set for Nick De Vries to really put in some sound performances for this year. He comes into a team where Tsunoda had a very disappointing 2022. Gasly really set the bar the last few seasons, and he departs for the Alpine. So De Vries slots into a seat that has historically been almost a revolving door of Red Bull drivers. So I think what they want to see from him is someone who can just come out, deliver some really strong performances, get in the points every so often, make it to Q3 if he's in that position to do so, and rival Tsunoda, who's on a contract year. He got extended for 1 year, and if it becomes clear early on that De Vries is the superior driver, then I think Tsunoda may not be featuring on the grid beyond this season. But notwithstanding that, I think because Tsunoda has had a couple of years of F1 driving under his belt, and as I've said before, there isn't really a clearly defined number one driver at AlphaTauri, I'd want to see a few more races from De Vries to really feel comfortable with getting him as an F1 fantasy asset. I don't think, though, he, as of right now, is going to be featuring in my Race Week 1 team. The reason being is that, just as a rookie, you're not really sure what you're getting, and in a midfield car where inconsistencies, strategy, reliability, whatever you want to call it, is just very much luck of the draw. And I guess we saw that quite a bit last season, where you'd have a midfield driver for a couple of races, they put in some 10 to 15 point scores, and then they have a DNF, or they end up with a 2 or a 1 or whatever it was. So I really want to see some consistency. I really want to see some solid performances from De Vries before he comes into my thinking. I've got him here at around $7 million, and I think that's actually a pretty fair price for him. I do think him and Tsunoda should be priced around the same, and because Tsunoda has had the kind of extra 2 years of experience on De Vries, I almost think that he should be priced slightly higher than De Vries as a rookie, and that's typically the case with most new joiners to the grid. But I think, if De Vries is able to consistently outperform Tsunoda, that $7 million, for instance, could be value for money. So he's going to be one that's on my list, but not going to feature in my team in the first week, as I said, unless we see anything in pre-season testing that warrants more serious consideration. But this is just a very quick video. I wanted to kind of get some thoughts down here on some drivers that I'm probably not going to look into too much ahead of the first race week. And I know, as has been the case, very well documented over the last few weeks, the game hasn't yet launched. I would expect that it probably launches on that weekend of preseason testing. The reason why I think that's going to be the case, unless we hear otherwise, is because last season, for instance, we saw a number of teams that were priced probably higher or lower than where they should be when the game launched before preseason testing. And Ferrari was one of those teams where They were priced, I think, at around 25 million for their constructor, and Leclerc and Sainz were both under that $20 million turbo driver threshold. And then we saw in pre-season both of them come out and completely smashed times. They did really well. They performed and exceeded many of our expectations. So I think what F1 is going to do is wait until we see those performances in pre-season testing and then announce the prices, release the game, and that'll really only give us 1 week to get our teams in order until the season kicks off, which is by no means a sufficient amount of time in my opinion, but I think that's probably the right approach and the fair approach with determining the prices for each of the drivers and the constructors moving forward. But anyway, that was just my 2 cents on the game. You'll probably hear more about that from me as we approach the end of February and pre-season testing. But if you liked what you saw and heard in this video, again, we'd really love it if you could give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. As I said, trying to hit that subscriber goal of 250 by the first race. So if you want to see more of this, which there will be as the season comes closer, subscribe to the channel. Love the support as always. And if you have any comments, questions in relation to what I've kind of spoken to already, please feel free to drop that below. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all very, very soon.